It's about time. I've been wondering if you were gonna wake up at all.
Where am I? How did I get here?
I imagine the same way I did. Him.
Right. I guess I never considered it had a gender. It was always just this thing. This monster.
The name's Charlotte. And if it's any consolation, I'm sorry your luck has brought you here.
My name's Jackson. Same to you.
What's your story? Clearly you already know about the Siren Head. Have you had run-ins with him before?
You could say that. He took my mom. I'll admit I've never fully recovered. I mean, I went after the guy with just an axe and a shotgun. How nutty must I have been? Every night for years, when I laid my head down, it wasn't the swaying of the wheat or the chirp of the crickets I heard. It was the distorted, muffled voice of my mother speaking to me. It was Siren Head.
Wow, that all sounds really rough. I know you probably heard it from everyone close to you, but it isn't your fault, Jackson.
Oh, I know it isn't my fault. It's his. Now tell me, how did you find yourself down here?
Mine might not be as tragic as yours, but it is complicated, to say the least. In my former life, I was a doctor. Well, at least I was training to be one. When it all began, I was simply a resident, under the tutelage of the master surgeon, Dr. Vincent Henderson. God, did I respect that man. There was no problem he couldn't fix, big or small. Man, if he wasn't set on fixing everything he could. Luckily, I felt the same way. I thought the two of us could change the world. I would have followed him to the end of the earth. Sometimes, it feels like I did. About 2 years into my residency, he became extremely focused on philanthropic aid. We started taking trips to hospitals in more impoverished areas, volunteering entire weekends at a time. He kept pushing me harder, saying that we needed to do more. It was our civic duty. I was constantly exhausted. I couldn't catch a break. If it was anybody else, I would have given up and found a new surgeon to study under, but he was so inspiring. I pushed through so much exhaustion and pain for him and for the people we were helping. Invariably, there were patients that we could do nothing for. Either we were too late or they were too sick. Over time, I started to become accustomed to death, as most doctors do. But Vincent took it hard every single time. He said it felt like he personally failed them. One night, we were closing up his practice, and he pulled a bottle of gin out of his desk drawer, told me I could stay for a drink if I'd like, and of course I did. As the night went on, he got more and more distraught, going on his usual tirade, berating himself for not doing enough. He said that every patient who died in his care was a life that he'd wasted. That stuck out to me. He never said that before. So I tried consoling him, saying that it wasn't up to him what they did with their lives. Then he looked at me intensely and said, "Maybe not, but there is something we can do with their deaths." He had me follow him into an exam room at the back of the practice, pushed a floor-to-ceiling storage cabinet aside to reveal a metal door that I'd never seen before.
Milo! Hey, Milo! Where are you, boy? Wow. A secret room. What was in there?
The room was a cold storage unit. I'd never known about it all my months of working with him. He unlocked it and ushered me inside. I remember the shock, mostly, and the smell. There were 4 bodies laying on metal exam tables covered in thin white sheets. Panic started to rise, and every muscle in my body was ready to run, but a certain curiosity held me back. He walked to the first body and looked at me before lifting the sheet. It was a Caucasian male, about 40, bloated and extremely pale. His skull had been opened and sewn shut again, and there were pins sticking into his scalp. There was a speaker in his mouth, stretching his lips abnormally wide. The second body Vincent uncovered was a Middle Eastern female, no older than 30, who I could tell had been beautiful before she was hacked up. The third one was very thin, probably someone who suffered from anorexia. She was definitely less bloated than the others, but that could have been because the body was fresher. At this point, my mind was spinning and it felt hard to breathe. Vincent barely showed any emotion at all, probably just trying to gauge my reaction. He did hesitate slightly before revealing the last body, though. I couldn't tell what it had been. The entire head had been removed. Instead of a neck, there was a metal pole sticking out from between the shoulders, and mounted on top of it was a large, cone-shaped speaker. More like a megaphone or a siren than a speaker, really. The body was completely emaciated. The skin was leathery, almost like it had been mummified.
I'm gonna stop you right there. This long-winded speech of yours really just boils down to your buddy creating this monster. That's all it is, isn't it?
There's more to it. Really, we...
We? What do you mean, we?
Just listen. Right after he showed me all of that, he explained the project to me. He needed help, he said. The two of us were doing all that we could, but it wasn't enough. There was still enormous suffering, even within our immediate community. Through this loss of life, he said he could build something useful, bodies to help aid us if he could reanimate them. This was going to be his greatest achievement, and he asked me to help him. He said he was very close to finishing the project, and he was sure his next one would work, but the operation would be delicate and lengthy. He needed me.
So what? You're in love with this guy, and you just do anything he asks?
It was complicated. I didn't say yes right away. I said I'd need time to think it over, which he agreed to. I knew it was disrespectful to the people whose bodies he used. I knew it was unnatural. Seriously, kid, I was torn about it. I couldn't sleep at night. My devotion to him and my belief in his work were pitted against this grotesque and extremely illegal project. But he procured a body just a couple days later, and when he called on me to step up, I just couldn't refuse.
Procured a body? Jesus, did you never ask where he got them from?
Of course I did. I had a lot of questions. So many that I thought he would accuse me of prying and throw me out of his office, or worse. But he was always patient and answered every question with the same calm logic he used that first night. The bodies were from a colleague of his. With the number of people that he helped, he'd won a ridiculous amount of favors and trust in the community.
And why the speakers?
Oh, the muscles used to create speech are much harder to control than muscles in your arms or legs. These things didn't need to talk much, but if they were going to interact with our patients, they need to speak a little. So the speakers were easier than trying to get their mouths to work. Well, we only accomplished that once. On him. I wasn't even in the room for that part. He asked me to step out, but the rest of the operation was grueling. Prepping the body took nearly 20 hours, and then we had to remove the head, attach the sirens, string wires around, graft muscle onto metal, cover the really gross-looking parts with extra skin. It felt more like an installation than an operation in some ways. We pumped that body full of steroids, had it attached to huge monitors, used electric charges. It was so experimental. I had no idea how he came up with these techniques, if you could even call them that.
So I was right. You made it.
Sure, we both did. I felt conflicted the entire time, but once the thing came to life, you have to understand, I thought this would only lead to good things, less suffering. I was proud to some extent. At first it seemed to go really well. We would give it simple commands and it would listen. We just kept him in his office doing little tasks under supervision. Then I think Vincent went back and worked on him a little more without me. He started growing. And by all laws of logic, that shouldn't have happened. He wasn't truly, really alive. At least at first. He became more violent and hard to control, and one day he just broke through the wall of the office and ran off. We tracked him down to this wooded area, and it wasn't hard. He created this path of destruction wherever he went. It wasn't anything like he does now, though. He was only about 10 feet tall at the time. When we found him, he was blundering around in circles and spouting nonsense from his sirens. He seemed confused, honestly. It was all just radio static and the occasional word jumble. Vincent and I tried to talk to him, but he either didn't understand us anymore or didn't care what we were saying. Eventually, Vincent decided he was a lost cause and wanted to try again with a sixth body. But by that point, I was thoroughly horrified at what our creation had become. I told him I was out. I couldn't continue the project anymore. And I've spent all my years since then tracking Siren Head, trying to figure out how to undo my mistake.
Milo, there you are. Good boy, Milo. Do you have any idea what grief you've brought people? I lost my whole family because of this thing. Who knows what it's done to other people in the 12 years since then?
You think I haven't thought about that? I've spent my whole life trying to make up for what I did.
How could you create something you had no control over?
But we did! I don't know what Vincent did to it after that first operation. That's what made us lose control.
Now, sounds like you're trying to tell yourself you're not to blame. Like you weren't responsible for everything it's done.
No, that's not true at all. Please, you have to help me.
I don't think so. You killed my mother.
Thanks for watching the video. We are super excited to continue our Siren Head story. If you'd like to help support the channel, check out our merch store at newscapepro.com. We also have a Patreon page that comes with all kinds of sweet perks. If you want to see your name on this list, check out the Patreon link in the description below. Chuko, Michael, Matthew, Pumpkin Pyromaniac, Rio, That Saxophone Guy, Blake, Dylan, Scorpion, Illy, and Martin are our top supporters this week. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you all next week for a very highly requested SCP.